Welcome to my video on the introductory CNC operations for our Robotics Fireball CNC routers. First thing you want to do is have a part model the way you want it. As you can see here, I just have a few slots, really basic part. To go ahead and start the CNC operation, you want to use this cam tab. If you don't have this cam tab, you need to either change computers and let me know so I can get it onto your computer. But this is critical for this operation. First thing we're going to have to do is create a setup. We want to tell the computer what we're putting in the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and click setup. Now, a critical operation is the way we CNC stuff is the bit is coming down from this orientation. So your Z-axis has to be pointing up. If your Z-axis for some reason is not pointing up, like this, as you can see, now it's expecting the bit to come in from this side right here, and that's just not the way we're going to set it up. So to do that, first thing right here, you're going to go ahead and select where it says Model Orientation, and you're going to select either one of these Z-axis options, and you're going to select any vertical line on your part. If it's upside down for some reason, you can just click Flip Z-axis, and then so you have it there. In terms of the X and Y, it doesn't really matter in the computer. You just need to know what orientation is your X and Y axis so you know what orientation to put your stock into the machine. So for example, I'm going to put my piece of wood more portrait style as opposed to landscape style because of my X and Y axis orientation. My Y is going vertical, my X is going horizontal. Stock box point is our next thing. This is where you're going to tell the machine is 0, 0, 0. We're going to go ahead and choose. I always choose a corner, specifically a top corner. And so this is where I'm going to tell the machine is 0, 0, 0, and then go ahead and mill from there. Be careful you don't choose a midpoint. Sometimes it's hard to see, so you want to make sure you choose a top corner. Model should be selected already, so that should take care of that. And now we go over to the stock tab. We're going to do what's called a relative size box. So it's going to have a minimum stock around it. What this yellow prism that you see here, that's the wood that you're putting in the machine, and this is what it's going to cut out. We don't need any offsets, so I'm going to zero out all of those things. And as you can see now, this representation of my stock is now the same size minus some of the corners and stuff as my model. Go ahead and click OK for that. So now is what we've done. We've told the computer what size and orientation of the wood that we're putting into our machine. The next setup is a pocket cut. We always want to cut out the pockets or the inside stuff before we do a contour or perimeter cut. If we did a perimeter cut first, this piece would already be loose inside the machine and there's nothing holding it down to do these pocket cuts. So in terms of orientation, our contour cut is always going to be last. I'll come up here to where it says 2D pocket. Again, it's picking this as 0, 0, 0. The first thing I want to do is choose my tool. I already had this set up, but we want to go ahead and choose a 1/4 inch flat. The easiest way to find this, because as you can see there's tons of different types of tools, is by type and then flat mill, and then we're going to scroll down, or I guess you're going to scroll until you find one of the many 1/4 inch flat mills. Don't be just choose the top one would be fine. Really any of them should do. There's very little difference in the different types of flat mills. So we'll go ahead and click select. And so now this is, as you can see, the profile of my cut. Now we got to do the feeds and speeds. Without getting too into this, the spindle speed, the computer cannot regulate the spindle speed on our routers. They're actually done on the tool itself. In case you're curious, they're going to set them up so they're spinning about 25,000 RPMs. As you can see, that changes everything else that we have here. Is what I want you guys to really worry about is the the cutting feed rate, and some of these other options down here. The cutting feed rate is how fast our bit right here is moving through our stock. 60 inches per minute is pretty fast. We could probably get away with it with pine, but we're going to go ahead and turn that down here to be safe to 40 inches per minute. So it's going to move at 40 inches per minute across my stock as it's moving around. I want my lead in to also be 40 inches per minute. And this again, if I was to show you a picture of this, my spindle is going to come down and feed in like that and then start moving around my stock. Well, that lead in is going to be 40 inches per minute as well as it's moving through my stock at 40 inches per minute. Lead out is kind of negligible, but we'll keep it at 40. My ramp feed rate, you'll see this on our simulation, but this is when it starts to spin to cut out these slots right here. I'm going to take that all the way down to 20 inches per minute. And my plunge feed rate, although I'm not using a plunge on this operation, I'm going to change it to 15 inches per minute. All the other ones leave as the default. They're really not going to affect anything here, but you may want to write these values down to go ahead and have them for a future reference. On to my next tab, geometry. So these are my pockets that I'm selecting. So since both of these pockets are of the same depth, I can go ahead and choose them both at the same time. Always choose the bottom edge of your pocket. Alright, even your contour, always the bottom edge, and you'll see why that matters later. Also make sure that that arrow, this is a pocket cut, so I want to remove all the material inside of here. So as opposed to the arrow being on the outside of my cut, you just click on it to move it to the inside if it is on the outside of your cut. For a pocket cut, we can go ahead and move on to the next tab, which is my heights tab. This is the height of the bottom of the bit that's going to be. So this is my clearance height, retract height. As you can see here, it's orange. It says orange up here, so this is how far it's going to remove. This is my retract height right here when it moves from one pocket to the other. My feed height, where it starts to ramp up speed and starts to plunge into my part. And then my top height and my bottom height. We're going to adjust these a little bit to make sure that we are safely moving through our part. My stock top, my retract height, I'm going to change to 0.3. My top height, I'm going to go ahead and leave at 0.2. My top height here for my stock top, this is where it thinks the top of my wood is in this case. I'm going to change that to 0.1. That way my first cut that it makes just barely touches my part, so my first cut, it's not diving into the part too hard. And then my bottom, alright, it says selected contours. If you remember back on the geometry, we selected the bottom edge, so it thinks that's our bottom, which is what we want. But just to make sure we get through the whole thing, we're going to go ahead and put a negative 0.1 on there so that it cuts all the way down through the bottom to make sure we completely clear out our part. Next tab, passes. A couple things here. Uncheck stock to leave. We don't want to leave any stock. We're going to go ahead and machine it perfectly. Go ahead and check smoothing. If you look at here, smoothing kind of gives you a nice smooth arc when it comes around here. I go ahead and add a 0 to smoothing, and if you actually hover over here and you were to read this box that shows up, it says make smoothing and tolerance the same for the best operation, so let's add a 0 here as well. Okay. Now, you need to have multiple depths. You don't want to plunge all the way into this and go around in one pass. You're going to incrementally take out wood right here. So I'm going to check multiple depths. And for us, our depth is going to be 0.1. So if this is 3/4 of an inch thick, it's going to take 7 or technically 8 passes to get all the way through, going down 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and so forth until the very bottom where it's going to take out 0.05 for multiple depths. Everything else we can go ahead and leave the same. Let's go to our final tab here, and you want to uncheck keep tool down. This way, if we had that left checked, when it's finished cutting out this pocket, to move over to this pocket, it would stay down and it would cut right across here, cutting out your piece of wood here in the middle. We want it to retract up to our previous heights tab that we set up in here to make sure that it moves over to the next operation, and then starts everything there. All of this we can leave the same, and we'll go ahead and click OK. As you can see, it's generating our toolpath. If you don't get a toolpath generated, you've made a mistake somewhere. If you look at this, it's going to go ahead and start its plunge right here, and then actually start cutting out. This is the feed rate here on these blue lines here. I go ahead and right click and go to simulate, check the box that says stock, and go ahead and hit play, and you can actually simulate what this is going to do so you have an idea what you have going on here. By dragging this cursor right here, you move it around a little faster, and you can actually see the stock going away. Everything there looks good, about the way I want it. I'll go ahead and click close, and now I have to do my second operation, which is a 2D contour. Go ahead and select 2D contour. The nice thing is all my feeds and speeds got saved. It just used the previous use setting. This didn't though, so 25. Alright, now everything didn't get all changed. We'll go ahead and change this back to, this was 20. Oops. And this was 15. All right, 40, 40, 40, 20, and 15. All right, my tool, I'm just going to choose my previously selected tool. I'm not changing the tool, so this is the tool that's used for the 2D pocket, so I'll go ahead and use it for this as well. Next tab, geometry. Stock contours. Again, I want to click the bottom edge. I want to make sure that my arrow is on the outside of my part, so it's cutting it out. I don't want it to be on the inside of the part, outside. Now, anytime you do a contour, you're going to cut it out, you need to have tabs. These are critical. As you can see in the picture here, it's going to leave these tabs in here so that it doesn't cut out your entire part, so that it's still holding down to the table. That's a really thin tab of a 1/16 of an inch. I make them 0.25, and just for the argument's sake, I'm going to go ahead and change the spacing to 1 so that I have more tabs going around. We'll take these off with a router. It's really easy, but you need to have tabs, and you want to make sure that you've changed the thickness of the tab so it's taller like that. Going to my heights, again, just like my previous one, 0.3. Stock top, I'm going to go 0.1, and then bottom offset negative 0.01. Alright, passes again, make these the same, check smoothing. Oh, I can make that, okay, as long as they're the same, it's fine. That's probably a little too high. That's alright though. Multiple depths, we always want to do multiple depths. Change this to 0.1. Everything else looks good. Final tab, again, make sure keep tool down is unchecked. Click OK. So as you can see here, it's going to come around here, it's going to lift up and not cut out stock right through here. Alright, we're going to cut that out on the router later after it's all said and done. I'll right click on it and go to simulate. I'll make sure my the stock is checked. I'll go ahead and click play, and I'll move it down, and I'll show you. So if you see here, the router bit's actually picking up and not cutting out these tabs, and we're going to remove them on a different tool after the fact. Also notice that it's cutting just a touch below my stock. That's that negative 0.1 I put to make sure my entire part gets cut out. Go ahead and click close. And now you're going to click on setup. You're going to right click on setup and you're going to go to post process all. This is where it's now going to convert this file that we just set up to G-code. Let's see, this is, you can leave that the same up there, configuration. Post configuration, this is the language that our router uses. There's a ton of them. We use emc.cps. So this is the language that can talk to our router. It should end in a .ngc. If you don't have a .ngc, you don't have the correct file type. Project name, CNC practice, output folder. You're going to need a flash drive for this. So I'm going to go ahead and have my USB drive selected. And then this is the file name it's going to save in there. I'll go ahead and click post. That's exactly what I want. Click post. And if you give it a second, you're going to have a bunch of lines of code show up. You want to make sure that you have, these are all the coordinates right here. This is our G-code, all the coordinates that's going to go through as it cuts out your part. As you can see, it's almost 3,000 lines of code. So everything there is looking good. You don't need to save this, it's already saved, just close it. One thing you can do that's kind of nice, if you go to simulate and if you hover on this part down here, you can kind of get a time. So it's going to take a total run time on my part. Let's see, I got 11 minutes for my slots and then 3 minutes to cut the whole thing out. So I'm going to be about 14-15 minutes to go ahead and machine all this once I hit play on the machine. That is my video for Practice CNC. Thank you very much.